hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Really have an exciting episode here. Mark Glasser is joining us today. But before we introduce Mark, I just wanted to jump in and give you a little bit of the background. If this is the first time that you're joining Monetizing Innovation, really wanted to give you just a little bit of the backdrop. Innovation isn't just about the big idea on the whiteboard or the strategy deck in the boardroom. It's about the messy challenges, the tough calls, the missed signals, and the leaders who choose to push forward anyway. We hear a lot about breakthroughs. We don't hear enough about the people behind them, the executives navigating uncertainty, the teams trying to execute under pressure, the innovators fighting for clarity in a noisy world, especially when you take the technical challenges that are facing us in so many different industries today. So again, I'm John Holcomb, and this is Monetizing Innovation. And today, like I said, we have a very special guest. Mark Glasser is joining us. He is a seasoned executive. He's currently on the advisory board and serving as the senior vice president at Row and .ai or Row and I'm sorry. And with his deep expertise in science, technology, materials, Mark brings decades of experience bridging engineering, strategic leadership, business transformation, whether it's innovating with industrial ecosystems or advising on global scale projects. Mark offers a unique lens on how technical mastery and corporate vision intersect. And as we look at some of this too, I think if you look at his long career, he has experience from defense, Department of Homeland Security, to industry and science. And so I think we're in for a great treat today. I have also posted into the chat here, basically the LinkedIn site for Mark, as well as the company, www.rowan.ai/Mark. So Mark, thank you again. Welcome to the show. And really appreciate you joining us today.
Well, it's an honor to be here. You're a great leader in the field, and you understand the insights about how to best use technology, how to implement technology. So thank you so much for having me as your guest. And as you know, we do other things together. So we've collaborated before, and we're going to collaborate a lot in the future. So thank you very much.
No, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to those collaborations. And so, Mark, as we dive in a little bit too, I think with the current company that you're in the middle of starting up and working with the co-founders, definitely a I'd say seasoned group, right? Several different Ivy League schools in terms of heritage, background, and education, as well as just a wealth of experience across industry. And, as we look at some of the work that you've been driving, I think number one, you've been doing so much of translating science into strategy. And so since you spent that career at the intersection of science, technology, and business, how do you bridge that deep technical expertise with the strategic decisions executives must make?
Well, thank you for the great question there about science into strategy. So I will start off with, and maybe end with this section too, repeating it, bottom line up front. At the end of the day, it's always been my role to remove uncertainty, whatever that is, and then also make decisions simpler while ensuring that innovation and technology actually move the mission forward. Again, that's just to summarize bottom line up front. And I think as far as translating science into strategy, I would break it down into three components. So the first component would be start with the consequences and not the technology. I mean, we all know about the dot-com bust, and we all know that perhaps it'll be something like that with AI. But at the end of the day, you have a fundamental problem you're trying to solve. You have a fundamental business that does that. So again, you start with the consequences and not the technology. And then the second point would be converting technical detail into business language. So we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. And the third would be tie technology to decision points, make the science usable and the strategy defensible. So we'll go back to the first point, which starting with the consequences and not the technology. What problem are you trying to solve? What are you trying to prevent? What are you trying to improve? Whether it's in the government sector or the private sector, businesses, executives, they all need to understand that. And it's the connectivity between the two, right? So what are the consequences and what are we trying to do and how can technology help us? And that goes back to perhaps a AI bust, if you will. Again, if it's a fundamental business that you're doing and AI is the tool, then that's going to accelerate what you're actually doing. And then the second point again was convert technology details into business language. of course, we know ROI, right? Return on investment. I mean, that's number one, right? The number one question, what does it cost? What are the benefits? Whatever realm you're in. So we're talking about the technology and what it does and what does it do? Does it help prevent something? Does it save money? Does it save time? Does it help with reputation management? Does it help with a competitive position? So again, just whatever those technical details are, we're converting it into the business language. And of course, each industry, every business has their own language or some commonalities, but just getting deeper into whatever sector or business that you're in. And the third point is tying technology to decision points. Again, is it a high consequence risk that has a low consequence? Is it have to do with ROI? Is it using data from sensors? Is it using AI? What is the technology we're using and what does it mean for the decision points? And again, make the science usable and have a defensive strategy. Why am I using it? This is why I'm using it. This is what it will do. This is what it won't do. So as I start off with this answer to this question, at the end of the day, my role has always been to remove uncertainty, make decisions simpler, and ensure that innovation actually moves the mission forward. And again, our job is to communicate to the CEOs or to the C-suite, bottom line up front. This is what it does. This is how we do it. It's our job to lead that and to work on the details of how to implement it and accomplish it. But again, we're communicating those points from removing uncertainty, making the decision simpler for those in the C-suite that have to make the decision, and then also how do we actually move things forward for the mission of the organization, whether it's profit, where it's protecting people, whatever that mission is.
Mark, I really love just the clarity in which you present that, because that is so key, right? Innovation for innovation's sake is meaningless, right? It really is about what is that target, how are we deriving value, and I really think that tying it to that milestone, right? Really making sure it's clear to what end are we applying the technology? What is that end result that we're looking for? I would love to hear a little bit more about, from your perspective, especially as your role at Roand, how you're looking at those next generation solutions, and how do you see the emerging technologies that you believe really reshape the global manufacturing and defense ecosystems over the next decade?
So it's about saving time, saving money, making your activities more profitable. Technology it leverage that, right? So we have to look at technology in terms of the advancement and what it does. And then we also have to worry about what society and others may perceive accurately as the negative consequences, right? So we also have to be a good community steward. We know we've already went through the agricultural age, right, to manufacturing, the information age, and now we're accelerating with the age of AI. And quantum computing, of course, is going to be another game changer. These things are happening quicker, right? We have to adapt more. So we're cognizant of it too at Rowan, and any technology company really should be. Is there a way that we can help people that we may displace? I mean, we've seen the studies where, AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. It's also going to create a lot of jobs. In the very simplest terms, the jobs that it will create is about the jobs that it will replace, maybe a little less. But the problem is the transition, those people that it's replacing, it may not actually translate into them going to work. So I think that's what we need to focus on about the next generation of technology. The quicker it actually advances, the more disruptive it is, and what does that mean for society? So that's more of a higher level, but I think it's important that we talk about this because we do have responsibilities for that.
No, absolutely. And I think, to your point, mentioned it at the beginning, especially with sort of the dot-com bubble and some of the things like that. AI, if it's being applied as a tool, can be very helpful for business practices, driving new, even technical capabilities, right? I guess one of the examples I used to love folks talking about was the introduction of the ATM, right? ATMs are now everywhere, but at the time, the fear was it was going to displace all the tellers at the bank. And now, if you look at banks, we still have the different aspects of it, but to your point, had to re-educate the workforce and redeploy the assets, right, of the organization. Can you share a little bit more on your thoughts about that, specifically with AI and some of the work that you see AI playing in, like you said, in the broader space of technology today?
Sure, and I do. You very good points. I mean, we've been through these transitions in history before, and as you mentioned, it's a partnership, right? It's a partnership between humans and technology. If you look at human progress and you look at a chart, and basically around the 1890s, progress was like this and it goes like that. Well, it's, as you know, the introduction of the steam engine. Again, we're making it very simple, and that's because it freed people up, right? It freed people up. You're not in the fields, picking apples or whatever you're doing. It frees humans up to use their mind. So I think we need to look, as you're saying, we need to look at AI that way too. We need to look at AI as freeing us up to use our minds, and we have to be very careful, right? I mean, we don't want AI to replace, as I call, the exercise of human thought. So I think, as you're saying, working together, how can we have more exercise of human thought and use AI, for the more mundane, routine tasks that are repeatable, which is obviously happening now. And this is maybe a little far out there, but I think the ultimate goal would be something like universal basic income for everybody. And with robotics and AI and what's next. So I think you're talking about way down the road, or however fast that happens. I mean, that's would be what would happen. It would be, again, between AI and whatever's next and robotics, that is going to replace a lot of things that we need to do, and that hopefully will free humans up. And then maybe it's somewhat right now utopia, but I would hope it would happen. So that's way down there as far as really advancing AI with robotics. I think you did mention earlier, like the global invitation, innovation, and talking about materials in the initial question. And again, that's material science, hardware, whatever hardware that is, and then of course AI and automation. So we kind of touched upon that. AI will, as it's accelerating what it has done already, it's going to work and complement. The science will complement that as far as advancements in material science, and then automation, robotics will as well. So you'll see, as it's happening now, and it'll happen even quicker, if you want the hardware side of it, computers, devices, handheld devices, and then the advancement of the hardware and sensors. And then again, now we're going to fuse that with AI and the predictive analytics of AI. AI is very good at pointing out patterns, and as we know, as you solve a lot of problems, is pattern recognition. So AI is excellent at that. So we can have pattern recognition enhanced by AI, and we still need a human check, right? Here's what AI
Mhm.
says, and then we certainly need the human check on that as well. And it's exciting too, with again, AI going to be AI is going to be enhanced with quantum computing. And I know a lot of us know what quantum computing is, but I really like the analogy of explaining quantum computing. So basically, right now we have zeros and ones, and either or. And so what quantum computing will do is, so if you had a coin, it's heads or tails, right? A zero or one. I like this analogy with far as explaining quantum computing. If you flip a coin, you flip that same coin, you can stop it at any point. So, right, it's infinity. So it goes from zero to one. So that's, for me, a simple way of understanding what quantum computing is. So I think that's fascinating. So again, that may have a bigger impact on AI. And then you put in there with the material science, and we're combining all this together, and the advancements. It's just what a marvelous time to be part of all this. So we'll have to see what happens with this material advancements. Things are lighter weight, increased resilience with these products. And then, of course, we have the robotics and the automation. And I know a lot of people are concerned about automation, the driverless cars, right? People are concerned about that. But I think what's fascinating is, yes, unfortunately, there have been a few deaths related to that. But something like, I have to check this, or somebody can check it, but something like 96% of all auto accidents are human error. So yes, I mean, again, it's risk management, right? Everything is risk management. Unfortunately, some people have been killed. That's terrible. But then again, you put the context of 96% of all auto accidents being human error, and AI or in robotics can diminish that significantly. It's amazing. Everything's risk management. So that's fascinating too. Of course, we have 3D printing, right? That's another hardware aspect of some homes are being printed that way. You can print custom things as you need them. So I think 3D printing will work well with AI and the technologies. And as you touched upon, the human machine team, and that's what we need to focus on. How do we work best together? What do humans bring into it? What does technology bring into it? Yes, certainly technology. AI is a decision support system, but we augment that with our human experience, and we augment with our judgment. And we need that domain expertise. You need that deep domain expertise. This is what AI says, but of course that needs to be verified. So we still need that. So those are all the exciting things. I mean, AI is obviously advancing, and then we talk about the hardware and material science, and then quantum computing entering in that. Really, the sky's the limit. The skies are limited by human imagination, right? So technology will help with that as well.
Now, I really love the way you put that too, because it's such a wonderful time for us to be alive, right? When you think about really all the capabilities that are starting to come together and how synergistic those capabilities are. Like you said, between the 3D printing to the AI to the quantum computing to medical health sciences, how that can revolutionize, right? I talked to one gentleman just the other day, and with some of the AI and some of the knowledge, to your point about now having some of these trained models and really the human guidance, he was actually very optimistic that we might have a cure for MS in the next 10 years, which is amazing, right? As a neurological disease, and catching it early by using AI to actually detect early enough that you can apply treatments when it matters. Taking it from that level, then maybe to the next level down, you've done a lot of leading through complexity. You've guided teams through technical, organizational, market transitions. What leadership principles have you proven most effective when navigating those complex, high stake environments?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I would say, again, I would break that down into three. I would say clarity of the mission in the middle of chaos. Chaos isn't necessarily bad, right? We have technology advancing, and in the same, risk management is not necessarily bad. People think it's right. It can be bad. There's good risk, and then also there's good chaos. So one would be clarity of the mission in the middle of chaos, and chaos is technology advancement, and of course it's happening quicker and quicker. The second point would be empowering experts, but anchor them to outcomes, right? We know you're a subject matter expert. We know this is your expertise. This is what you're great at. But what are the outcomes that we need from that expertise? And as we talked about too, communicating risk honestly and early. You hear in the news about these crises that happen that companies or people have suppressed. And of course, if it's not proprietary information or very sensitive information, as soon as something happens, you want to communicate that. So communicating risk honestly and early, that's very important. And in honesty, and so we talked about this. The background that I'm using, I've actually took the picture. So that is credible source. It's an actual place. It's Ross Lake in the North Cascade Mountains. So again, going back to the clarity of the mission in the middle of chaos. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of that in my career with the U.S. State Department, with the Department of Homeland Security. And again, it's talking about what it is and what you know. You don't necessarily have to have the answer, and you may not have the answer. And if you think you have the answer, of course, it's dynamic. So as long as you communicate that, right? This is where we are. This is what we think can happen, but this also may happen. So and people need to know the why of that, and they also need to know why it matters and why it doesn't matter. So I think that's important for clarity of the mission in middle of chaos. And again, going back to the second point, empowering experts. Again, what are the outcomes that we need for them? Whether they're engineers, analysts, whether the C-suite, whether subject matter experts, to innovate, we need to decide what the outcomes are, and we need to drive them to those outcomes, and we need to know the consequences of that. We need to know the timeline, and we need to give them deliverables. So that's our job as leaders, to make sure that they understand the consequences of what we're doing and why we're doing it. This is the timeline it needs to be done in, and here are the deliverables. So we're, again, empowering our experts. We're leading our teams, we're leading our individuals, but we're anchoring them to outcomes. And then the third point was communicating risk honestly and early. Again, what happened, why, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. Even in bad news, and the thing about when there is bad news to deliver, the sooner and the more transparent you are with it. Again, with those who need to know. Not everybody may need to know. Of course, you're concerned about reputation management, or government, you may be concerned about classified information or something like that, of course. So we need to know who needs to know. And there's some way you can also package it with some way you could probably say it to everybody that needs to hear it without revealing proprietary information or information that would create grave danger. But again, it also builds that trust. Hey, this is what's going on. It's not good, but this is it. And I'm just communicating. And so it's building trust. And we know how much important that is and what's going on. There's so many media sources we can choose from. Not all of them are credible. And to that point, I mean, there's so much going back to the chaos and tying into point one, the chaos, and then turning into the communication aspect. Our brains are about 10, our current brains are about formed about 10,000 years ago. They're not made to process all this information. That's an issue. And the other issue, and this goes back to communicating honestly and early, the way that a lot of this technology works is they may get this complete article and then they make a summary of it and they send that out to people, and then other technology people make summaries of that, and then, 10 revisions later it's not really what it was meant to be. Make sure we check that with communication as well. And again, now our job as leaders in this complex system and society is, again, reducing uncertainty, keeping people aligned. We can have our differences. We need our differences, especially when we're talking about innovation and ideas, but ensuring the momentum doesn't stop and we understand what the end goal or outcomes will be.
I love how you stated that, Mark. Just the clarity of that is so important, especially navigating the chaos, right? I think to your point, that communication piece is how you drive the clarity through the chaos. And like you said, that really is the role of the leader, right? To help work with the teams and bring those different points of views together to be able to drive that clear picture, even when, it may be a little bit, not a little bit, a lot fuzzy in terms of where we're going, right?
The point, CEO or the person have the pom poms have these ideas, the cheerleaders. I got this great vision. I'm not sure how to do it, but that's why we have everyone else here to help decide that and implement that and working together. And you have to, like you said, you have to bridge that. It's a great idea. It's technology enhanced and possible, but how do we do it?
Absolutely. And it's really fascinating because I think you've already touched on this a bit, especially when we think about insights and future trends. And as an advisor, what recurring blind spots do you really see in companies trying to innovate at scale? And what separates those from those who succeed and those who stall?
Well, I think, again, we talked about there's so much information out there, right? There's like, how do you decide? I mean, just individuals, let alone companies, right? We have email, we have social media, we have text, we have phone calls. Like, again, it's the same with an idea. There's so much information out there supporting or detracting from it. How do you actually decide what that most valuable piece of information is, and what are those pieces that will help you drive to what you need? Again, AI is great with that, right? AI is a very powerful tool. Of course, a lot of us use ChatGPT. Of course, we know there are a lot of other large language models out there, but they're very helpful. They're helpful for helping reduce that noise. And then how do you stay focused on what you're doing and still keep up with everything? That's a challenge too. I think our attention spans are shorter. Our attention is much needed in many more areas. So it's keeping our eye on what the prize is and understanding this is so important. This is but like confusing activity with progress, right?
Right.
That is such a good term. How do we spending our time? Is it getting us to what we want to do? So again, let's not try to confuse activity with progress. So like effectiveness and efficiency, right? Effectiveness is getting something done, but efficiency is getting the right thing done. So that makes us much harder to do with all these distractions, with all these great sources of information. And that's the focus, right? The focus is understanding what you need and how to get there.
It makes me reflect too on what's your perspective on the need for leaders to really be able to get some of that unplugged time, right? Because like you said, we're overstimulated almost every day, right? Do you have any thoughts from that, especially as you think in this innovation space and how we influence the broader community?
Yeah, I will answer that with a global response. It's about knowing who you are and your purpose. And of course, we can have many purposes. We have our family, right? We have our employment. We have our dedication to things we believe in, whatever that is. So I think it's the better that we understand who we are and what we want to do with this one amazing earthly life. That's the key. So knowing who you are, knowing what you want to do and figuring that out. And again, it's going to be in several different areas. And that will drive what gives somebody more satisfaction? Is it more satisfaction to go walk for 3 hours, or is it more satisfaction for somebody to go walk for 20 minutes and spend the rest of the time on their project? So I think it's a very good question, and it's an individual question. And I think it's also harder for us to figure out who we are today because we have so many different sources of role models. And I think we can touch upon that and what that means for the younger generation too in a minute.
Oh, that's wonderful. In fact, yeah, what are your thoughts in terms of the implications for the younger generation?
So they just want what the quote older generation has. I like the term that we don't get old, we get older. But anyway, they want, right? They want a good job, they want a home, and they want retirement, basically, right? And if you look at any economic data, that's tougher to get, right? It's tougher to get these days. And some kids feel they're lucky if they have one, if not all three. Older generations have all three. And then, some we're past lifetime employment. Maybe our grandparents had that, or maybe our parents, but we're past lifetime employment. And then retirement is, there aren't hardly any pensions anymore. It's on the individual again. So I think as technology leaders and our, again, responsibility to society is to figure out how can we enhance the American dream or the world dream. It's not just an American dream. How can we enhance that for some of the younger generation? They have more complexities to deal with, right? Older generations grew up with one phone, three channels, right? That was it, like we were talking about before, and the ATM and going to the bank and all that. So it's so much more complicated, and then there's so much information out there for them to choose from, so many sources, what's credible, what's not, and then our attention spans have gone down. So I think all these things, technology can help a lot. And I will say technology also gives anyone, including a younger generation, more ways to be themselves, more ways to be successful. The best thing about technology, it's an absolute, but we'll say one of the best things, decentralization, right? What wasn't available, a mainframe computer in the 60s and 70s, and now you have more computing power and with your device in your hand, the decentralization, right? And pushing this technology down to the lowest level possible and to the individual user, that is probably among the most important things about technology, the decentralization. And so that it gives anyone more tools to do different things. So I think that's important. But again, we have to pay attention to those three things. We have to pay attention to good jobs, right? Good jobs and satisfaction, and then housing. How does somebody obtain their home? And then of course, what are they going to do so they can retire? Again, technology can accelerate those things, technology can improve those things, but they can also make it more challenging.
No, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I think this has been such an incredible discussion today too, Mark. I can't thank you enough. And I think like you alluded to at the beginning of our discussion, I'm really excited because I think we're going to have many more discussions together and also many more collaborations that we'll hopefully be able to share with the audience here in the near future as we continue to push this journey. I guess with that in mind too, are there any thoughts that you would really like to really make sure you share with the audience before we end the session?
Well, I think it is important to talk about I guess reemphasize, right?
Mhm.
Confuse activity with progress, and also understanding that there is friction, right? Friction is not necessarily bad. We have some political friction today. The important thing is that people can say what they feel, say what they think, and we can share that. And that's true whether politically or in a business, right? We do want input if from outside sources. You look at Einstein and you look at Newton, and they came from outside the traditional way people were educated in science, and they had some amazing ideas, right? Paradigm shifts, and it's because of their outside perspective. They didn't read the same textbooks, they didn't have the same professors, they didn't go to the same universities as a lot of others. So I think it's important to embrace different opinions and different ways of getting there, right? Risk making process. So I think that's important. As we know, we can prevent a risk. Hey, I don't want to be in an earthquake. I'm moving somewhere there's no earthquake. Oh, I want to live here. I want to mitigate that. I'll have a house in an earthquake fault, and I'll buy earthquake insurance. You can accept it, right? Okay, well, I know earthquakes are possible and it's going to come someday. And the other one is to transfer that risk to insurance policy. So I think we don't incorporate the four principles of risk in the decision-making process. I think the overall importance, almost the most important thing we're talking about with anything was how we spend our time, what we do for a company, what a business does, what a government does, is ROI, right? Return on investment, opportunity cost. I mean, that's so important. And that should be in your daily decisions. And I will finish up by talking about what I think separates the most successful people from the people that are not as successful or stalls, right? That winners operators take advantage and put into the operation innovation, right? We operate, we put innovation into whatever we're doing, and we tie the technology to the mission, tying the technology to the mission. We have to empower the right people. And then we use the data to provide information, but we still need that human check. We still need that expertise. And I think those are among the most important things. Treat innovation as an element and not as the main driver. And the core is everything else like it's always been. It's the people, it's the process, it's the mission. And I think that summarizes things well.
That's fantastic, Mark. No, I really love that clarity of perspective. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's one of those things that as we work, especially with the folks that we're leading, the folks that we're trying to help, having that clarity of mission, the clarity of where you want to go. And that's, bringing the folks together like that, and really appreciate you sharing your thoughts today. And again, I'm really excited to continue the collaboration and hopefully have several more podcasts on some of these topics as we drill a little deeper.
Just one more final thought to your point and what you've done. Again, translating complexity into clarity. I mean, that's what we should do as individuals. That's what we should do as businesses. That's what technology accelerates. So the topic itself and the title you came up, it's amazing, right? It translating complexity into clarity. So good for you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate your time today, and I will make sure that everything's posted in terms of your website, your individual information, and I'm excited to have you back on here soon so that we can continue the dialogue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to be your colleague and your friend.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.